I had not heard my best friend's voice in 40 years when I found her name sewn into the lining of an old coat. Marcy and I were inseparable from the age of 7 until the year we both turned 21. And then life did the quiet, undramatic thing it does. It pulled us apart so slowly that neither of us ever noticed the exact moment we lost each other. I spent the 4 decades since believing she had simply forgotten me, moved on, left me behind. I was 61 years old, alone, cleaning out a closet, when a small cloth laundry tag proved that I had been wrong about that for 40 years. I want to tell you about the name sewn inside that coat, and what happened when I finally went looking, because it gave me back something I had quietly mourned for most of my adult life, and it taught me something about the friendships we lose that I wish I had understood decades sooner. It did not give me back the 40 years, but it gave me back Marcy, and it gave both of us the truth about why we lost each other, which turned out to be nothing like what either of us had spent 40 years believing. My name is Pam Aldridge. I am 61 years old, a retired bookkeeper in Erie, Pennsylvania, widowed 3 years now, my children grown and scattered across the country. I am going to tell you what the coat revealed. But first you have to understand Marcy, and the particular grief of a friendship that no one ended, that simply faded. I think the grief of a faded friendship is one of the least talked about griefs there is, precisely because there is no event to point to, no funeral, no divorce, no falling out, nothing that gives you permission to mourn. When a marriage ends, people understand. When someone dies, there are casseroles and cards. But when you simply lose touch with the person who was once the other half of your soul, there is no ritual, no acknowledgement, no socially recognized loss. You are just supposed to have moved on, to have grown up, to have replaced them with adult friendships, as if the friendships of your youth were a phase rather than a love. So you grieve it alone and in silence, often for decades, and you half convince yourself it does not count as a real loss, that you are foolish to still feel the absence of a friend you have not seen since you were 21. I am here to tell you that it does count, that it is real, and that the friendships that shaped us before we were fully formed leave a space that nothing later quite fills. Mine was Marcy-shaped, that space, for 40 years. From the time we were 7, Marcy was the other half of me. We grew up 2 houses apart, and there was not a day of my childhood or my youth that did not have Marcy in it. I do not know how to explain to younger people what that kind of friendship was, in the years before phones and the internet, when your best friend was a physical, daily, constant presence, in and out of each other's kitchens, sleeping over so often our mothers stopped asking. We knew everything about each other. We had the kind of shorthand that takes a decade to build. She was the person I told first, always, about everything. The first kiss, the heartbreaks, the dreams. I assumed, the way you do at 20, that Marcy would simply always be there, that a bond that total was permanent, weatherproof, a fact of the universe rather than something that needed tending. That assumption, I have come to believe, is the quiet killer of more friendships than any fight ever was. When you are young and a friendship feels eternal, you do not tend it, because tending implies it could fail, and it does not occur to you that it could fail. You water the relationships you fear losing. You take for granted the ones that feel like bedrock. And so, paradoxically, the deepest, most secure-feeling friendships are often the ones most vulnerable to drift, precisely because their very strength convinces both people that no maintenance is required. Marcy and I never tended our friendship because it never occurred to either of us that it needed tending. It was too obviously permanent for that. We would not have dreamed that the thing we never doubted could die of simple neglect. I tended my marriage, my children, my newer and more fragile friendships, all the relationships I was a little anxious about, and I let the one that mattered most slip away untended, because I was so sure it could not slip. If I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self one thing, it would be that nothing is too strong to need tending, that the bonds you are surest of are the ones to guard most carefully, because their strength will lie to you and tell you they can survive anything, including your neglect. And then we turned 21, and Marcy fell in love and got married, and her husband's job took them away, to Columbus, a few hours and what felt then like a whole world distant. And that was the beginning of the end, though neither of us knew it, because in 1986, a few hours might as well have been an ocean. We wrote, at first. Long letters, often. And then, the way it goes, a little less often. And then I moved too, for my own marriage, a couple of times, and somewhere in the shuffle of changed addresses and busy young lives, and the slow entropy that swallows long-distance friendships, in the era before you could carry everyone you'd ever known in your pocket, somewhere in there, the letters stopped. Not with a fight, not with a goodbye. They just stopped, and the silence grew, and at some point the silence became permanent, and I lost the other half of myself without a single dramatic moment to mark the loss. That is what still astonishes me about it, looking back, that something so enormous could end so quietly. If you had told me at 20 that I would lose Marcy, I would have imagined it could only happen through some catastrophe, a terrible fight, a betrayal, a death. I could not have conceived that the most important friendship of my life could simply evaporate, molecule by molecule, through nothing more violent than a few unanswered letters and a couple of changes of address. There was never a day I thought, today I am losing Marcy. There was just an accumulation of ordinary days in which I did not write, and she did not write, each of us waiting for the other, until enough ordinary days had passed that the silence calcified into something that felt too large and too awkward to break. How do you write to someone after 2 years of nothing? After 5? The longer it went, the more impossible the reaching out became, until it was easier to simply grieve her than to figure out how to cross all that accumulated quiet. The friendship did not die of any single wound. It died of 1,000 ordinary days on which neither of us did the small thing that would have saved it. Here is the part I never told anyone, not even my late husband. I grieved that friendship for 40 years. I built a good life. I had a marriage, children, work, friends, real friends, good ones. But I never again had what I had with Marcy, that total, effortless, decades-deep belonging, and I came to understand that you probably only get that once or twice in a life, and usually young, and that I had had mine and lost it. And the loss had a particular sting because of the story I told myself about it. I had stopped getting letters from Marcy eventually, and the story I built was that she had forgotten me, that she had moved on to her bright new married life in Columbus and simply let our friendship go, that I had mattered more to her absence than she had to mine. I believed, for 40 years, that Marcy had dropped me, and so my grief was tangled up with a quiet hurt, a sense of having been the one left behind, the one who cared more, and I had folded that hurt away and carried it, unexamined, for most of my life. I thought of her often. I never tried to find her. Why would I chase someone who had let me go? Better to keep the dignity of my hurt than to reach out and be confirmed forgotten. The thing I am most ashamed of, looking back, is how easy it would have been to look, even before the tag, and how steadfastly I chose not to. It was not as though Marcy was truly unfindable all those years. People find people. But finding her would have meant admitting I wanted to, would have meant risking the confirmation of my worst story, that she would not care to hear from me, that I had been forgotten. And so I protected myself from that imagined rejection by never testing it, which is the oldest trick of a wounded heart. We would rather keep a painful belief safe and untested than risk the small terror of finding out we were wrong. I chose 40 years of certain grief over the small risk of a phone call, because the grief, at least, could not reject me. So I never looked. For 40 years, I never looked. And then my husband died, and 3 years later, I finally started cleaning out our overstuffed house, and I found the coat. It was a beautiful old wool coat, deep green, vintage even when I got it, and I had kept it for 40 years without ever really wearing it, because of what it was. Marcy gave it to me, the week before she moved away. It had been her grandmother's, and she loved it, and she pressed it on me that last week, said she wanted me to have something of hers to keep, said wear it and think of me. I have thought about that gesture so much since. She was 21, leaving for her new life, and of everything she owned, she chose to give me her grandmother's coat, the most precious thing she had, because she wanted me to carry a piece of her into whatever came next. It was, I understand now, her way of saying what neither of us had the words for at 21, that she was frightened of losing me, That she knew, on some level beneath knowing, that moving away might cost us something, and that she wanted to leave me an anchor against it. Wear it and think of me. She gave me a coat so that I would not forget her, and then we both spent 40 years convinced the other had forgotten anyway. The coat did its job in the end, just 40 years later than she intended. She gave it to me to make sure I would think of her, and it was the coat, finally, that brought her back. 21-year-old Marcy, frightened of losing her best friend, sowed the seeds of our reunion into a parting gift, and neither of us knew it, and it took 4 decades to bloom. I will never get over the tenderness of that the very object she gave me to remember her by was the thing that returned her to me when remembering was no longer enough. I had kept it, through every move, in the back of every closet, this one tangible piece of Marcy, too sentimental to wear and too precious to give away. And now, at 61, going through everything, I took it out to finally decide its fate, and I was checking the pockets the way you do, and I felt something stiff in the lining near the hem. I turned the coat inside out to look, and there, sewn into the lining, the way the old dry cleaners used to do it, a small cloth tag stitched in to track a regular customer's garments, was a tag I had never noticed in 40 years. It read, in faded laundry marker script, M. Caldwell. I stared at those 2 words for a long time before I understood what I was looking at. People who are younger than me may not know that this is how the old dry cleaners used to keep track of things, before barcodes and computer tickets. For regular customers, they would stitch a small, permanent cloth tag right into the lining of a coat or a good jacket, with the customer's name and sometimes their details, so the garment could always be matched back to its owner, no matter how many others were on the rack. It was a small intimacy, really. Your name sewn secretly into your own clothes by someone whose job was to take care of them. And Marcy, in the months before she left, living her brand-new married life in Columbus, had taken her grandmother's green wool coat to be cleaned, and some clerk had stitched M. Caldwell into the lining, and then she had given me the coat, and neither of us had ever known the tag was there. Her name had been riding inside that coat, against my own coats in the backs of my own closets, through 40 years and a half-dozen moves, the entire time I believed I had no way to reach her and no reason to try. The thread back to Marcy had been sewn into the very thing I kept to remember her by. I just never turned it inside out until I was 61. Marcy's married name, Caldwell, and beneath it, an address in Columbus and an old phone number, the dry cleaner's record of where its customer lived, sewn into a coat she had owned before she gave it to me, a coat that had been cleaned at a shop near her new married home in the months before she left. Her name, her address, 40 years old, sewn into the lining where it had been the whole time I grieved her. I sat on my bedroom floor holding that coat, and I felt the strangest thing rise up in me. Not just nostalgia, but a kind of summons. The tag was 40 years out of date, of course. That address, that phone number, were ancient history. Marcy could be anywhere, could be anyone, could be gone. But holding her name in my hands, stitched into the coat she'd given me, with wear it and think of me, I felt something I had not let myself feel in 4 decades. The simple, uncomplicated wanting of my friend. Not the hurt, not the dignity, not the story about being left behind, just, I miss Marcy. I want to find Marcy. And underneath it, a thought that frightened me at 61, alone in a house emptied by death. I do not have unlimited time left to find the people I have lost. The hurt that had kept me from looking for 40 years suddenly seemed like the most foolish luxury, a pride I could no longer afford. Widowhood does that, I have found. It strips away the luxuries of pride and grudge and someday, because it teaches you, in the most direct way possible, that the people you love are not permanent, and that someday is not guaranteed. When my husband died, I learned the hard arithmetic of a life, that there are only so many days, that they run out, that the things you keep meaning to do can simply become things you never did. And sitting on that floor with Marcy's name in my hands, 3 years into living alone in a house too full of a dead man's things, I felt the arithmetic press on me. I was 61. If Marcy was alive, she was 61 too. Whatever time there was left to find each other was finite and shrinking, and the pride that had cost us 40 years was about to cost us whatever years remained if I let it. I think if I had found that tag at 40, I might still have talked myself out of looking, might have let the old hurt win. But at 61, freshly acquainted with how things end, I could not afford the hurt anymore. Mortality has a way of making you brave about the things that frightened you when you thought you had forever. So I decided, sitting on that floor, that I would try to find her. The tag gave me a starting thread, an old name, an old place, and I am not without resources. I spent my career tracking down records. I would pull that thread and see where 40 years had taken Marcy Caldwell, and whether she was still anywhere to be found. It took me 3 weeks and a good deal of help from one of my grandchildren, who is far better with computers than I am, but we found her. Marcy Caldwell was alive. She was 61, like me. She had been widowed, like me, 2 years before. She had moved back, of all places, to within 90 minutes of where we grew up, and had been living there, alone, for several years. 90 minutes from me, while I grieved her as good as gone. My hands shook as I dialed the number my grandchild found. I had rehearsed what I would say, of course, sitting there with the number in front of me, but everything I rehearsed sounded wrong, too formal or too casual. How do you greet someone after 40 years of silence? What is the etiquette for that? In the end, I rehearsed nothing usable and just dialed before I could lose my nerve, my heart going like I was 20 again and calling a boy. It rang 3 times, and in those 3 rings, I lived through every possibility: that the number was wrong, that a stranger would answer, that she would answer and be cold, that she would answer and not remember me, that she would answer and be angry. I had prepared myself for all of those. I had not prepared myself for the one that actually happened, which was that she would answer and remember me instantly, and have been carrying me in her heart the whole time. We brace ourselves for rejection so thoroughly that we forget to prepare for the possibility of being loved. A woman answered, an older woman's voice, and I said, "Marcy? Marcy Caldwell? This is Pam Aldridge, from Maple Street." And there was a silence on the line so long I thought I had the wrong number or had frightened a stranger. And then I heard her start to cry, and then I heard her say the thing that broke open 40 years of my misunderstanding in a single sentence. She said, "Pam, oh my God, Pam, I thought you forgot me. I thought you forgot me 40 years ago." She thought I forgot her. I had to sit down when she said it. I was standing in my kitchen, gripping the phone, and the floor seemed to tilt because in one sentence, the entire architecture of my 40-year grief turned inside out. All those years I had cast myself as the one left behind, the one who cared more, the abandoned one nursing her dignity. And here was Marcy, on the other end of the line, telling me she had cast herself in the exact same role, had spent the exact same 40 years believing she was the one I had discarded. We had each been the heartbroken one. We had each been certain we were the victim of the other's indifference. Neither of us had ever once considered that the other might be sitting somewhere, year after year, feeling precisely the same abandoned ache about us. It is a strange thing to learn that your private 40-year grief had an identical twin living in another person all along, that you were never grieving alone, that the very friend you mourned was mourning you back with the same wrong story playing in her head. For 40 years, Marcy had been carrying the exact grief I had been carrying, the mirror image of it, certain that I was the one who had let go, that she had been the one left behind. We had each spent 4 decades believing the other had done the abandoning. We had grieved the same lost friendship from opposite sides of the same misunderstanding, each of us nursing the same quiet hurt about the other for 40 years. We talked for 4 hours that first call, and over the weeks that followed, we slowly reconstructed what had actually happened, and it was almost unbearably ordinary. There had been no abandonment on either side. What there had been was the postal service and a series of moves in an era with no way to track anyone down. The letters had not stopped because either of us stopped caring. They stopped because I moved, twice in those years, and Marcy's letters to my old addresses came back or vanished, and by the time the dust settled, she had no current address for me, and I had a vague, wounded sense that she'd gone quiet, and each of us, getting no replies, drew the same wrong conclusion. She's moved on, she's forgotten me, I won't be the one to chase her. Both of us, too proud and too hurt to send the one more letter, make the one more effort, that might have found the other. We were not abandoned, we were undeliverable. I keep coming back to that word, because it captures something true not just about Marcy and me, but about a whole generation's worth of lost friendships. We were the last people to come of age before the world made it impossible to lose anyone. Young people today could not drift apart the way we did if they tried. They are bound together by a dozen invisible threads, phone numbers that never change, social accounts, group chats, the whole searchable web of modern connection, so that even the friends they stop speaking to remain perpetually one tap away, findable, never truly lost. But we had paper. We had addresses written in pencil that went stale the moment someone moved. We had a connection that was only as durable as the last envelope, and when the envelopes stopped finding their targets, people simply vanished from each other's lives, completely, sometimes forever. There is a whole generation of us, now in our 60s and beyond, carrying the ghosts of friendships that did not end so much as get misplaced, lost in the mail, undeliverable. I suspect a great many of those ghosts are like Marcy turned out to be. Not gone, not indifferent, just unfound, sitting somewhere within reach, grieving us back, waiting for a thread we never thought to pull. Two women who loved each other lost 40 years to changed addresses and wounded pride, each blaming the other for a silence that was really just the cruel inefficiency of paper mail and the ease with which young people lose track of each other before they understand how rare what they have is. Nobody dropped anybody. The mail dropped us both, and we each blamed the friend instead of the post office and let a misunderstanding eat 4 decades of a friendship that neither of us had ever actually ended. We met in person 2 weeks after that first call, halfway between us, at a diner, two 61-year-old widows who had last seen each other at 21. I will not pretend I recognized her instantly. 40 years rewrites a face. But I recognized her the moment she laughed, because some things 40 years cannot touch, and her laugh was exactly the same. And it was 1985 again for 1 second, and then we were both crying in a diner booth, and the waitress very kindly left us alone. We must have sat in that booth for 5 hours. The coffee went cold and got refilled and went cold again, and we talked the way you talk when you are trying to pour 40 years through a single afternoon, jumping between the deep things and the trivial ones. Our whole adult lives traded back and forth across a laminate table. I learned about her marriage, her late husband, her 2 sons, the city she had lived in, the job she had loved, the losses she had carried. She learned all of mine. And what struck me, hour after hour, was not how much we had to catch up on, but how little catching up the friendship itself required, as opposed to the lives. The facts of our 40 years were new to each other, yes, but the way we talked about them, the ease, the laughing, the way she knew exactly when to reach across the table and put her hand on mine, none of that needed catching up at all. The lives had diverged completely. The friendship had not moved an inch. By the time we finally left that diner, blinking in the late afternoon light, the 40 years had somehow folded down into nothing, and we were just Pam and Marcy again, 2 girls from Maple Street who happened now to be 61, walking out to our separate cars and already planning when we would see each other next. And here's the thing that has astonished me most about the months since. The friendship was not gone. I had assumed, if I ever found her, that we would be strangers, that 40 years would have made us into 2 different people with nothing left in common but old memories. It was not like that at all. Within an hour, the shorthand was back, the ease, the finishing of each other's sentences. The decades-deep foundation we had built before we were 21 was still there, intact, under all the years, and we simply started building on it again where we'd left off. I have thought a lot about why it came back so fast, when 40 years of adult friendships had never given me anything close to it, and I think it is because of when it was built. The friendships of childhood and youth are laid down before we have any defenses, before we learn to curate ourselves, to perform, to hold back. Marcy knew me before I had a self to protect. She knew the unguarded, unfinished, true version of me, the one underneath all the careful adult layers I spent the next 4 decades constructing. And when we found each other again at 61, all those adult layers turned out not to matter, because she could see straight through them to the girl she had always known, and I could see straight through hers, and so there was no getting to know you, no careful adult circling. She already knew me at the deepest level a person can be known, and that knowledge had simply been waiting, dormant, untouched by 40 years of absence. You cannot build that in your 60s. You can only build it young, and if you are lucky enough to have built it and then lucky enough to find your way back to it, it is still there, exactly as deep as the day you stopped tending it. The years on top were gone. The foundation underneath was untouched. It turns out a friendship that real does not actually die from neglect. It goes dormant, like a garden in winter, and it can come back astonishingly fast when you finally tend it again. We are 61, and we have, improbably, found our way back to being best friends, the thing I thought I had lost forever at 21. That was a year ago. I am happier now at 61 than I have been since my husband was alive, and a great deal of that is Marcy. Loneliness, I have learned, is not really about being alone. It is about being unknown, about moving through your days without anyone who holds the whole of you, past and present, in their mind. After my husband died, I was profoundly lonely in exactly that way, surrounded by kind people, none of whom had known me longer than my adult life, none of whom remembered the girl I had been. Marcy remembers. Marcy was there. When I am with her, I am not a 61-year-old widow with a manageable, narrowed life. I am the whole of myself, 7 and 12 and 21 and 61 all at once, because she carries all those versions of me in her memory and reflects them back. That is what I had lost without being able to name it, and what the coat gave back. Not just a friend, but a witness to my entire life, the one person left alive who knew me before I was finished. Everyone should be so lucky as to grow old beside someone who knew them young. I nearly missed my chance at it by 4 decades and a wounded heart. I will spend whatever years I have left grateful that a tag sewn into an old coat gave me back the witness to my own life. Marcy and I talk nearly every day now, the way we did when we were girls. We see each other constantly. We are both alone, both widowed, both rattling around in 2 empty houses, and finding each other again has been, for both of us, the great, unexpected gift of our 60s, a companionship in old age that neither of us thought we would have. We have started talking, half seriously, and then more seriously, about finding a place together, 2 old friends sharing a home the way we shared everything when we were young, growing old in each other's company instead of alone. People raise their eyebrows a little when we mention it, 2 widows in their 60s planning to move in together, as though companionship in old age is supposed to come only from a spouse or from one's children, as though a friendship is not a serious enough thing to organize the last chapter of a life around. But I have stopped caring what raises eyebrows. I spent my whole adult life treating friendship as the thing you fit in around the edges of the real relationships, the marriage and the family, and I think now that was a mistake, or at least an impoverishment. Marcy and I are each other's person now, openly and without apology, the way we were at 12. Our spouses are gone, our children have their own lives, as they should, and we have found, late and by luck, that the friendship we built before either of us ever married is more than capable of being the central relationship of our old age. There is no rule that says the great companionship of your final years has to be romantic. Ours is a friendship 60 years in the making, interrupted for 40 of them, and it is as deep and sustaining as any marriage, and I will arrange my last chapter around it proudly. I gave her back the coat, her grandmother's coat, the one with her name still sewn in the lining, and she gave it right back to me, and now we sort of share it, this green wool coat that lost us and found us, passing it back and forth. And we have both agreed that whoever outlives the other gets to keep it, with both our names in it now. We had a tailor add a second tag to the lining, beneath the faded old one, a clean new cloth tag that reads simply, in both our handwriting copied out, Pam and Marcy, found again. So now, the coat carries the whole story in its lining, the 40-year-old dry cleaner's tag that lost us and the new tag that found us, the before and the after stitched one beneath the other against the same green wool. Sometimes I take the coat out just to turn it inside out and look at the two tags together, the old one that I never noticed for 4 decades, and the new one that exists because I finally did. And the whole arc of it sits there in my hands, the loss and the recovery, the grief and its undoing, in 2 small pieces of cloth. I think when I am gone, whoever gets the coat will read those 2 tags and understand more about love and time and the friends we lose than I could explain in 1,000 words. It is all there, sewn into the lining, that we were lost and that we were found, and that the distance between those 2 facts was only ever a single phone call I waited 40 years to make. 40 years I grieved her, 90 minutes away, grieving me the whole time. All it took to undo 4 decades of mutual loss was a laundry tag I never thought to look for, and the simple, terrifying, ultimately easy act of finally reaching out instead of nursing the hurt. I want to leave you with the 2 things this taught me. The first is about the friends we lose to drift, because they are different from the friends we lose to fighting, and we treat them wrong. When a friendship ends in a fight, there is a reason, a rupture, something real that stands between you. But most lost friendships do not end in a fight. They end in drift, in moving away, in getting busy, in the slow entropy of distance, with no rupture at all, nobody's fault, nothing actually wrong between you except the silence itself. And here is the trap. When a friendship dies of drift, we almost always invent a reason, because the human mind cannot stand a loss without a cause. We tell ourselves they forgot us, they moved on, they didn't care as much. We manufacture a hurt to explain a silence that was really just life and distance. And that invented hurt then keeps us from ever reaching back, because why would you chase someone who let you go? But they didn't let you go. You drifted, both of you, and you both probably invented the same hurt about each other, and you are both probably still out there, missing each other, kept apart by nothing but a misunderstanding neither of you ever tested. Do not trust the story that they forgot you. You usually have no evidence for it but the silence, and silence lies. The second thing is more urgent, and it is simply this. Go find them while there is still time. I almost didn't. I spent 40 years not looking, protected by my pride and my invented hurt, and I came within an inch of letting Marcy and me both die alone and estranged, 90 minutes apart, each grieving the other, when one phone call could fix it. And did. The only reason I have my best friend back in my final decades, instead of dying without her, is that I finally, at 61, swallowed the pride and pulled the thread. If there is a friend you lost to drift, someone you think of and miss and assume has forgotten you, I am asking you, from the far side of 40 wasted years, go find them. Make the call. Send the letter. Risk it. The friends life drifted you apart from are usually still out there, missing you back. It is never too late to go find them. If this story landed for you, drop the word coat in the comments below. I read them. It tells me which stories are worth telling next. And if there's a friend you lost to time and distance, someone you've assumed forgot you, go pull the thread. They probably never forgot you at all. Subscribe for new stories, real patterns, full narratives, the long game. 2 small pieces of wisdom from this one before I go. First, the friends we lose to drift are not the friends we lose to fighting, and we treat them wrong. A friendship that ends in a fight has a reason standing between you. But most lost friendships end in drift, in moving away and getting busy and the slow entropy of distance, with no rupture at all and nobody's fault. And the trap is that when a friendship dies of drift, we invent a reason anyway, because the mind cannot stand a loss without a cause. So we tell ourselves they forgot us, they moved on, they cared less. We manufacture a hurt to explain a silence that was only ever life and distance, and that invented hurt keeps us from ever reaching back. But they did not let you go. You drifted, both of you, and you probably both invented the same hurt, and you are probably both still out there missing each other. Do not trust the story that they forgot you. Silence lies. Second, go find them while there is still time. I spent 40 years not looking, protected by my pride and my invented hurt, and I came within an inch of letting my best friend and me both die alone and estranged, 90 minutes apart, each grieving the other, when one phone call could fix it, and did. The only reason I have her back in my final decades is that I finally swallowed the pride and pulled the thread. If there is a friend you lost to drift, someone you think of and miss and assume has forgotten you, go find them. Make the call. Risk it. The friends life drifted you apart from are usually still out there, missing you back. It is never too late to go find them. The friends life drifted you apart from are usually still out there, missing you back. It is never too late to go find them. I'll see you next time.